There is a remarkable small museum in this Midwestern town of 58,000 people. It owes its existence to one man, and its notoriety to another. This is the story of great art you haven't seen, that you drive by or fly over without even knowing it. But if you look, if you get off the path more traveled, it's there. Oh, and this marks 6 months that I've been sitting here talking to you about art. So to celebrate, I thought we should get off our collective butts, grab our new camera, and get out there and actually look at stuff. Art lovers, welcome to my traffic jam. My name is Christopher West, and this is the place where we talk about all things modern and contemporary art and design. And so much of what we talk about is art in the big cities, at the big museums. I recently did a video on Felix Gonzalez Torres at the Art Institute of Chicago, and my most recent video was on Joan Jonas, who just opened her retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. But there is so much art in those in-between areas. So for the past few months, I've been thinking about what this channel should be. And I thoroughly enjoy talking about art and maybe introducing you to new artists that you're not as familiar with. But what I really want to do, what I want us to do, is to get out there and see art, to experience it firsthand. Yes, the internet and Instagram and YouTube is super helpful in getting you familiar with artists. But the best way to see art is to experience it, to be there with it. So today we are heading west, assuming we get the traffic moving again. But we are on Interstate 70 in that stretch between Indianapolis, St. Louis. And I bet our destination is not one that you would have guessed. That's right. We're going to Terre Haute, Indiana. We are at the SWO Museum of Art in downtown Terre Haute, Indiana. Terre Haute is a town probably more well known as the place where Larry Bird played his college basketball, but more than 80 years ago saw the founding of its art museum. At first glance, it's like many other museums of its size. There's a focus on American Impressionism and regionalism. It seems every area in the country had a group of artists in the late 19th and early 20th century that were inspired by the European Impressionists and were struggling to find a voice of their own. And this museum is no different. But then you catch a glimpse that maybe there's something else going on here. You are greeted by this spectacular Art Deco sculpture by Paul Manship. Its subject is Diana, the goddess of the hunt. If the artist looks familiar, you've probably seen his piece at Rockefeller Center, or maybe at the Smithsonian. And, like most museums scattered throughout this country, there is a temporary exhibition space to give platform to local and regional artists. But at the top of the stairs, you find this painting by Paul Jenkins. Not one of my favorite artists, but also not one I expected to see represented in a collection in Terre Haute. Across the gallery hangs this Robert Motherwell, called Wave 2 from 1962. Now we're getting somewhere. And then there's this Fairfield Porter, which is particularly great. I like Porter and the way he stuck to his guns to produce realistic paintings during the height of abstract expressionism. And there's something about this piece, this boy that's alone, but not far from his home, so not totally alone. It resonates with me. But I didn't come here to talk about Fairfield Porter, American regionalism, or even Art Deco sculpture. I came here to see 3 paintings. It was in the 1930s when Sheldon Swope, a jeweler in Terre Haute, Indiana, passed away. Now, Sheldon was not just a jeweler, he was a very successful jeweler. But Mr. Swope was not an art collector, and there's no evidence other than his love for design given his profession that he was even that much of an art lover. But what he wanted to do was have a lasting impact on his community of Terre Haute and the broader Vigo County. And he thought his community needed an art museum. So he left part of his downtown real estate holdings and a vast bucket of cash to help fulfill this mission. He left very few instructions, other than the fact that they should collect American art, the museum should always be free, and in very atypical 1930s fashion, its board should always be led by a woman. So the board got to work and hired Rogers Cox as its first director. At 26 years old, he was the youngest museum director in America. And as Cox was deciding what this fledgling institution might look like, he quickly realized that the traditional path of collecting old masters would be out of reach for their budget. And so he focused on purchasing the best examples of art he could from the art of his time. He made multiple trips to New York and formed the base of the collection by purchasing 23 works in 15 months. He would secure loans from the Whitney Museum of Art, MOMA, and the Art Institute of Chicago. And in 1942, the museum would open with more than 130 works on display. 17 of those 23 works he purchased remain in the collection. But the three I mentioned earlier, the Edward Hopper, the Grant Wood, the Thomas Hart Benton, remain the cornerstone of this fantastic little collection. Any museum in the country would be delighted to have these three paintings in their collection, but to be able to spend time alone with them in this remarkable place, in this town of only 58,000 people, is an incredible experience. But there is one more artist we really must talk about, Rogers Cox, that young, ambitious, 26-year-old museum director, did not only purchase art, but he made it as well. And I would argue he may be one of the greatest artists you've never heard of. He made less than 20 paintings in his life, as each one could take years to make. 3 works are currently on display by Cox, and I guarantee if you take away the Hopper, the Grant Wood, the Motherwell, I guarantee I would still be standing here begging you to come see these paintings in this museum. There are a couple other paintings by Cox scattered throughout the country. There's one in the collection of the Cleveland Museum of Art and another in the St. Louis Museum of Art. But this is the only place where you can come see 3 of his paintings, more than 15% of his total output for his career, in one place. And as I look at and think about this collection, I can't help but think about some of the projects I've done in the past, many of which I'm very, very proud of. I can't help but think that Sheldon Swope and Rogers Cox did something most of us can only dream of. The Swope Museum opened more than 80 years ago, and Sheldon Swope died more than 90 years ago. But here we are today still talking about it, and still talking about the impact it's had on the community. If you've got other ideas about art that is off the beaten path, please let me know down in the comments. I've got a couple ideas in mind that I'm going to start working on, but I would love to hear your thoughts as well. And it would be an honor if you would consider subscribing to this channel. I always appreciate those who make it to the very end, so thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Ciao.